The one word answer here would be curiosity. No matter what you do, if you're not curious, it becomes a deadbeat job. As a consultant, you have to really know your audience. You have to really get into their shoes, wear their hat to understand where is it that they're coming from. And all of that takes curiosity. Building products without understanding your customers, their needs, demands, aspirations, fears, you would not be able to build a product that drives any conversion. Building a startup, it's a lot of curiosity about every aspect, not just an idea alone does not build business, revenue does. How do you get to revenue? Startup is do not get fixated on anything. Your problem is not a problem until someone is paying you to solve it. Your product is not a valid product until someone is paying to solve it or paying to use it. Your business model is not validated until and unless you have money. Your GTM is not validated until and unless you have money. So to that becoming a co-founder is a marriage. Why is it a marriage? If you just stop and ask yourself this one question, you'll realize that what happens in a marriage? You fight with your spouse and you'll not speak to them for a week, but then you'll come back to the same marriage and relationship and you start working towards the same family, building the same things together. So no matter what happens between you two as
Hey everyone, welcome to I'm a Recruiter podcast. I'm your host and host Prafula Deori. I'm a Recruiter is not just a community. It's a place to inspire people, anyone who needs little motivation in their life. Here we share real stories of people just like you and me who have faced failure, doubts, tough times, but keep going and found success in their own terms. So if our podcast bring even a little inspiration in you or someone you know, please show us some love by sharing, commenting, and don't forget to subscribe by clicking the bell icon so that you never miss any episode of ours. Big thanks to Vantahire, your AI powered recruitment partner. Let's keep learning, growing, and making difference together. Now let's start today's conversation. So get ready to be inspired. We all dream of landing roles, tech giants like Amazon, Cisco, or even working abroad in US or UK. We also imagine launching our own startups, making a real impact. But to turn those dreams into reality, we need guidance from someone who have walked that path. So today we have a special guest who has done just that, who has worked with major MNCs in India and US, built his own startup from ground up, and now supports thousands of new ventures across India. He's even an active investor in the startup world. So please join me in welcoming Amiya Srivastav. Amiya, we are thrilled to have you in our podcast, and thanks to you for accepting our invite. We are really excited to learn from you. And as we discussed, this podcast is mostly to inspire people who want to work in product space or who want to start his own startup as well, right? So since you have a huge amount of experience, we would love to know your advice, your suggestion.
Sure. Thank you
Once
so
again,
much,
welcome.
Praful, for having me here. It's a pleasure, and I would really love to contribute to see how we can help people become the better version of themselves. So thank you so much for having me.
Great, Amiya. So before we start, Amiya, if you can quickly tell our audience कि आप क्या करते हो अभी फिलहाल and what your company is into and how you are helping the startup companies or ventures, right? As a mentor, as an investor, as a guide.
Sure thing. So right now, the founder of Juvian Ventures. Juvian Ventures essentially helps early stage startups assess their true potential in terms of figuring out what the business viability is. How much clarity do the founders have around building a business within this segment that they have chosen to? And then to build on top of that, we run an investor readiness program as well, where the startups can potentially come in, learn through the entire journey, consolidate, optimize, and build the foundations of building their startup. And once they are qualified, then we start interfacing them with the investors that we have within our network. And we are doing more partnerships and this and that here and there. So they're up and looking forward to it.
Great. And let's say if someone would love to connect with you or your venture, how they can reach out to you, a
Sure.
venture.
Yeah, sure. So I am available on LinkedIn. Just go to www.linkedin.com/n/AMIYSRIV. Just connect with me there, or you can go to our website, www.juvian.com. You can connect with us there. And for anything else, connect on digital mediums first, and then we'll talk.
For the audience, for the startup, you want to reach, feel free to connect with him He's a great mentor. I have known him for a couple of months now. It's almost a year, I would say, to be very precise. And he have guided some of the very useful tips which are really helping me to build my startup as well. Right. Definitely, I would request if you have any idea or you need any guidance, feel free to reach Amiya. Great. So moving to our first question, Amiya, right? So before we to what things are happening in your life, if you can quickly tell us about your background कि आप कहाँ से belong करते हो and brought up कहाँ हुआ आपका education background क्या था, if you can help us with those little bit so that our audience can connect with you.
Absolutely. So, born in UP, brought up in UP. The first 18 years of my life, I was in UP. Did my education from KIET in UP. That's for my undergrad. And then went to UK, did my master's there to heavily technical wireless communication space. Worked there for a couple of years, came back to India, started working with MNCs into technical role related to the wireless space. So that's how I got into Cisco. And then did some consulting for Cisco, technical consulting. I was with them in the consulting role for nearly 1.5 years. Then went into product management. So the bug to say that, you know, consulting about some products, what does it take to build these products? That's what came into the mind. And I was really like, okay, let's try and explore what it takes to build products. So went into product management, started my career as a product manager with Cisco, responsible for one of the product verticals there, and moved on to Amazon, I in the team from a product perspective. And I was with Amazon for a couple of years. COVID hit, things changed, and a lot of things happened in between. A lot of losses. I'm sure everybody else has, seen that phase and wondered why some things are happening. So same space. Eventually quit my job, started my own venture, that for some time, and then took an exit from there. And since then, I've pretty much been into the startup ecosystem, doing startups, rising startups to some of the Indian organizations, and then joined a micro VC fund as a partner, and I was with them for some time, and then moved on to Juvian Ventures. Overall, if you think about my life, my journey, had the privilege to be in certain places in the company of certain people. That was really helpful. The fact that I've been an entrepreneur, mentor, advisor, investor, so I've pretty much touched upon every aspect of what is there as a part of business. And at the end of it, settling down on working with people to help them get to the next level at Juvian Ventures. So that's where I'm at. One thing led to another and things happened. There was no conscious decision, action, whatever of any sort. I think by the grace of God, things just, the dots started connecting and I got to where I am. But yeah, really no plan there. It just happened.
Great, great. So you have owned multiple different heads, right? You have been a consultant, you have been a product manager, now founder, investor as well, right? What is one of the common thread you see in all those things? Like,
Right. Okay, so I think the one word answer here would be curiosity. No matter what you do, if you're not curious, it becomes a deadbeat job. As a consultant, you have to really know your audience. You have to really get into their shoes, wear their hat to understand where is it that they're coming from. And all of that takes curiosity. Building products without understanding your customers, their needs, demands, aspirations, fears, you would not be able to build a product that drives any conversion. Building a startup, it's a lot of curiosity about every aspect, not just product. So now, from a startup perspective, I see a lot of people who are absolutely sure that this is a problem. But then the entire sort of the secret sauce to building a successful startup is do not get fixated on anything. Your problem is not a problem until someone paying you to solve it. Your product is not a valid product until someone is paying to solve it or paying to use it. Your business model is not validated until and unless you have money. Your GTM is not validated until unless you have money. So to do all of these things, you have to be really curious about what's working, what's not working, what's moving you to the right direction, or whatever your perception of the right direction is. And as an investor as well, investment is a lot about being curious, asking the questions that nobody else is going to ask, poking holes. Everything stems from your innate ability to be curious about different things. And then you build on top of that. So startups, risk taking, investment, risk taking. How much of an appetite do you have? Can you really execute on that appetite in the first place? So I think to sum up as an answer, I would say be curious, especially when you are young, because once you get to 40, The pressures of life get to you, but when you are young, certainly be curious. Try more things, do more experiments. I think that's one common thread, because for me to switch from the kind of different roles that I've done, I would not be able to do that if I wasn't curious enough, if I wasn't willing to experiment as much. Right. So that summarizes response to the question.
Yes, totally agree. I think में अगर if you don't have that curiosity, you can learn new things as well, right? Otherwise, you will be doing the same monotonous work without having any purpose, without having any goal. Curiosity है जो आपको अंदर से वो इंस्पिरेशन दे देखो क्या होता है, क्या नहीं होता है, सीखो टाइप. Great,
Absolutely.
good answer. Good to know, Amiya. And one more thing is, as a middle class generally, right? इंडिया में जैसे बहुत सारे मिडिल क्लास लोग हैं फैमिली के बैकग्राउंड से, है ना? सो फॉर देम मोस्ट ऑफ द पीपल आर टॉट कि अच्छा कॉलेज जाओ, अच्छा जॉब लो, लाइफ सेट है तुम्हारा. सो मुझे भी वही बताया गया था एंड मोस्टली सबको ही वही बताया जाता है इन जनरल, राइट? सो हाउ टू कम आउट फ्रॉम दैट माइंडसेट, क्योंकि आप यू हैव बीन एन एम्प्लॉय एंड यू हैव मूव फ्रॉम बीइंग एन एम्प्लॉय टू बिकमिंग ए फाउंडर ऑफ ए स्टार्टअप, एंड दैट इज ए माइंडसेट शिफ्ट ऑल टुगेदर, राइट? वहां से कैसे निकला अपने, एंड व्हाट हैव हेल्प्ड यू?
See, at the end of the day, all of this is about who you are. If you find comfort doing what you are doing, and if you're the kind of person who seeks comfort, then there is nothing else that anyone else can say or do or prove that will help you move out of that mindset. So it has to come from within. So couple of things: that how confident are you really, the kind of person who's confident about most things? There are kind of people who know a lot but still not confident about it. There are kind of people who don't know anything but are still very confident about some things, right? But the fact that, are you willing to take risks? How far ahead in the future are you thinking? Are you really trying to figure out ways to learn more? So essentially, coming back to the original answer that I gave, right? The curiosity of all of it, your risk taking capability, how financially secure you are. All of these things are eventually going to drive your next steps. Some people would never want to leave a comfortable job. Even if they want to take a bigger risk, they would move to a job that has got more risk to it. The role is more pronounced. But moving to a founder role, honestly speaking, you have to be a bit crazy to do that, because it's, trust me, being a founder is a lot tougher than being on the job. But for me, the motivation was mainly from the inside, that what I was seeing around the world, especially. So for me, I think in my case, the situational context is important as well. COVID played a huge role for me to make that jump. There were lots of things that were going on that, I was really taken aback by, not in a good place, to be honest. But then once that trigger kicked in, I was really like, okay, do I really want to do this? Do I want to pursue this kind of thing? What would it take? Do I have that safety net? Well, again, it's just me. I didn't really have a safety net in terms of anyone else backing me up. But eventually, the desire to be able to make a difference is what drove this move from being into a job to being a founder, to be able to make a difference to the lives of so many people if things work out. That's how I started. But then, thankful to God that I'm seeing some things work out where, people are, I'm actually able to make a little bit of difference to some people. So I'm really happy about that. But yeah, that's my trigger. That's my motivation.
सो जनरली अगर लाइफ में कुछ ऐसा बड़ा इंसिडेंट नहीं होता तो एवरीवन प्रीटी ओके इन देयर लाइफ विथ व्हाटएवर थिंग्स आर गोइंग ऑन. सो कैन आस्क यू कि क्या हुआ था ड्यूरिंग द कोविड टाइम, so that like our audience can also learn from it, because still I believe like there are lots of potential in India overall, but still people का वही same mindset है. So people are not familiar with, मतलब उनको वो एक्सपोजर ही नहीं है अभी भी बहुत सारे टियर 2 टियर 3 सिटीज में. सो आई वांट टू नो कि क्या क्या हो सकता है लाइफ में, एंड व्हाई इट्स गुड टू हैव टू बी योर ओन बॉस, चाहे वो जितना भी टफ हो.
Right. So what happened, I really wouldn't want to get into the depth of it, but what
ओके
I'll say
ओके.
was that a fairly common scenario of deaths in the family, COVID effects on me as well. I actually suffered from brain fog. I really didn't know what I was talking about. To most people that I was talking to, I was quite dangerous not to know, not dangerous, but scary as well. That, some of the conversations that I was having, and I didn't realize how prolonged it went until much later, that, when there was clarity in mind that, okay, I know what I'm doing, what I'm talking about. That sense was missing for a while, especially in the second wave. So more likely one time-ish, mid of one onwards. So again, deaths, personal health, all of those things, it actually contributed and put me in a place where I was like, okay, let me make this decision to sort of make that jump. But here is the thing, life has its own plans. And to be honest with you, I'm actually thankful that to a certain extent that some of these things happened, because otherwise I would not be doing what I'm doing. 100% no way that I would be doing what I'm doing right now. Right? My plan
Yes,
was
yes.
very set in terms of what I wanted to do. But things happened. They sort of drove me into a certain direction to get me where I am. So anything literally can happen. The closest things that people can think of are in terms of something happening to your near and dear ones, something happening to you being incapacitated. It's probably one of the biggest fears that anybody could have, right? Especially in the mind. So it really doesn't matter, because to a certain extent, I'll talk about 2 points. One, I honestly believe that the universe has its plans. It drives you to
Yes.
where you could do your best, but you have to have that belief that I could make good
Yes,
out of this
yes, yes.
particular situation. And the second thing, on touching on your point of being your own boss, it has its pros and cons. So while you have no one else to report to in a organizational structure, the accountability, the responsibility of people you're managing, of customers you have, any stakeholders you have, that doesn't change. So be your own boss, be in a job, the responsibility, accountability, ownership, the more you have it, the better. Especially prominent if you're your own boss. Everything. So in a job, you would not have to worry about how the money is going to come from, where the money is going to come from to be able to run my business or do my work.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if you're your own boss, you have to do that. You have to be worried about it, right? You're paying salaries to different people. You have to worry about where their salaries are going to come from. So no, it's not easy. But yes, it does give you a lot more satisfaction if you're able to actually manifest what you intend to manifest. Talking to customers, talking to people, like, you were very kind enough to say that, in some form or manner, I was able to guide you in some way. But these are the kind of things sort of give that sense of gratitude that, I was able to make. It's very difficult, especially if you're a new company, on the block. Nobody really knows you. Nobody really trusts you as much. So to be able to do all of that, hustle through, build something out of it, does take a lot more than what it would in any job.
Yeah, yeah. Agree, definitely. So now since I have been in the startup world for almost like 2 months, so I can definitely understand, Amiya, what you are telling, because you have to do everything. You have to prove your presence in terms of customers. You have to find the clients. You have to find the team. You have to build something out of nothing, right? And every day you have to keep yourself motivated, right? There can't be any downtime as well. But
Nope. And the
one,
rejections, the
yes,
constant rejections that come your way.
yes,
You
yes,
have to,
yes,
I
yes,
mean,
yes,
in a job, when someone comes to you and tells you that, okay, this is what is happening, and you're like, no, how could you say that to me? This is not something that's okay.
yeah,
When you're
yeah,
your own
yeah,
boss, this happens more often than you can think.
yeah,
People
yeah,
will come
yeah.
and tell you things that you would never be okay with in a job, and you still have to live with it. So the rejections, criticism, very
Yes,
real. They happen.
agree. One thing which I observe कि आप काफी gratitude के बारे में भी बात कर रहे थे. You also talked about a manifestation as well. Like, so I personally believe in all those things. And since I have heard from you, I wanted to ask कि सही में ये like आपके लाइफ में भी मैटर करते हैं ये चीजें? Does it have helped you in your life as well throughout your journey? Because I personally believe, and many of our guests whom I have invited, also somebody other way, they also believe. So I also wanted to know your input, Anya.
I have come to believe. So I wasn't really the kind of person, when I was younger, a lot of young blood. But since then, life has had its own ways and methods of teaching that, not everything is in your control. And once you realize and understand that, you have to really be thankful for what comes your way and accept it with as much grace and gratitude that, some things that have worked out. At least for me, I can say that I'm still one of the privileged people, really not struggling to find my next meal. I'm not struggling to find my next place of shelter. Right. So I'm still feeling that I'm very privileged that way. So somewhere life has had its ways and methods to teach me to be more graceful, have more gratitude towards everything that you have. And yeah, I think that's where I stand. That's what my belief is as we speak.
Right. So the next question which I have is like, generally whenever we tend to move from like job to a startup, right? You should have some kind of backup, some kind of cushion. You mentioned that आपके पास कोई वैसा backup नहीं था, कोई cushion नहीं था. So how did you survive those tough times? क्योंकि easy नहीं है ये. Since I have like the 6 months runway, I can feel the heat कि हर time वो constant प्रेशर रहता है कि कैसे नेक्स्ट 6 महीने के अंदर कैसे रेवेन्यू जनरेट होगा, कौन सा क्लाइंट से आएगा, क्या होगा, क्लाइंट एक्विजिशन कैसे होगा, लॉट्स ऑफ प्रेशर. एंड अगर कोई फैमिली सपोर्ट नहीं है, सो वो थोड़ा सा और डबल हो जाता है.
So,
व्हाट
see,
डू यू
for
थिंक,
me,
लाइक आपका कैसा क्या हुआ था?
yeah, so for me, I wasn't really in as tight a situation because when I made the decision to move to being an entrepreneur, I had no loans, no debts, nothing whatsoever.
ओके. ओके.
So that was a good thing. And I
यस.
had the kind of runway that could help me survive. I was in good jobs. So they paid well. So I didn't really have to worry about it as much when I started out. And also, I have to be really thankful to my family in terms of my wife and the immediate family support system as well. So my wife was working, so I didn't really have to worry about the income from a family perspective. So that sort of helped as well. Family was supportive in terms of emotional support, moral support. But yeah, no, not a lot of financial backing as such. If I wanted to sort of take some outrageous risks, I couldn't. So I had to build that. But yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it. That's why when someone wants to start out, I actually sort of touch upon, your financial stability because I know firsthand that starting up is not easy, no matter how confident you are to be able to build a sustainable business where you are able to draw enough salary out of it. It will take time. It's not going to happen easily. And to be able to build bigger business, big enough business to be able to draw salary, that itself is a huge question mark. Will you ever be able to do that in the first place or not? So none of this is easy. So have that backing, at least from your own salary. Understand what your expenses are. Understand what your lifestyle is like, and then build your runway. Say that, okay, even if I continue with this lifestyle, how long can I last? And obviously accommodate for the expenses that are going to happen on the business. And when you have a sustainable period, people talk about a year or two. I say between 3 to 5 years of sustainable money you should have before you even think about being an entrepreneur. Especially if you're not in your 20 somethings, then your risk appetite is very different. Once you are relatively older, you have a family and this and that, it's a very different scene.
आपने भी बिल्कुल सही बोला.
It's very difficult to convince, but be practical about it. Have your timelines, milestones, say that, okay, within the next 2 years, this is what I want to achieve. If not, then you know what I'm going to do next, right? So convincing someone is relatively difficult, but telling someone and putting the demons inside their head to rest, that's relatively easier. You address the problem, what's happening in someone's head, and then they are more willing to listen to you rather than you trying to put and project your point of views on someone. They're not, most likely they are not going to be okay with it. So actually understand where the concerns are coming from and then go address that.
Yeah. And I think since I am very new, mostly the situation will be related to financial. Most of the time, I would everyone will first think कि अभी तक तो लाइफस्टाइल ऐसा है, हम लोग लाइफस्टाइल चेंज कर पाएंगे भी, और कर पाएंगे तो कैसे, कितना हद तक, मतलब since you didn't have any kind of EMIs, there are many people who will have EMIs as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Can we take those kind of risk?
Yeah. So I strongly advise against it. Don't take risks when you have EMIs and loans on your head.
Yes. Great. Moving to our next question. So you have been working with several early stage startup with Juvian Venture, right? What is the most common mistake you have seen with hiring early teams in those startups?
I think most prominent one, I would say, it starts with co-founder. That would be that you're hiring for skills, not for people. Here is the thing. Early stage startups are more about people than skills. If you have best people with the best skills, but the worst attitude, your startup is going to get shut down. There's really nothing that you can do, or you have to let go of the person. So from a hiring perspective, people are more important. A lot of the skills can be learned. They can be taught. But if the person that you're working with is an inherent pessimist and your graph as a startup is going south, they will bail more quickly than you can even figure out ways to get that back up. So I think the biggest thing that I see, and I generally advise people to figure out how you can establish that your conviction around someone, not just their skills as a person, who they are, what is it that they are all about, what their convictions are, what their fears are, what their ambitions are, and then try and figure out where you could plug them. What happens if things go south? What happens if things start looking good? All of those permutation combinations play a huge role. And trust me when I say this, it's a very long-term game. None of this is going to materialize in 6 months, 3 months, 9 months. It's a minimum 1-2 year game. So you have to have the kind of people who are going to stick with you for that long. Otherwise, people coming in, going out, your process is already disrupted. How would you actually focus on building a sustainable business out of it? So focus more on people. That's a very strong advice that I have for every early stage founder out there.
Yes. And like, so generally there are many platforms like Y Combinator or many other places to find co-founders as well, right? What is the best advice you have to find the good co-founders? Because technically तो बहुत सारे platform है, but what is your personal advice?
That's a very tricky part, actually. So here's the thing. I'm sure you've heard that becoming a co-founder is a marriage.
Yes.
Why is it a marriage? If you just stop and ask yourself this one question, you'll realize that what happens in a marriage? You fight with your spouse and you'll not speak to them for a week, but then you'll come back to the same marriage and relationship and you start working towards the same family, building the same things together. So no matter what happens between you two as a spouse, you are always in it together. With co-founders, the one and only question that I have beyond their ability to fill the certain hard skill gap is, can you fight with them? Have you seen their worst? And can you come back to it and still start working together? That's not a technical problem. That's a psychoanalytical problem. So if you are with someone as a co-founder whose worst you can't take, if you are the kind of person whose worst your co-founder can't take, the relationship, the probability of the relationship surviving is relatively lower. So the way I think about this is work with people to understand them first. And again, co-founder agreement and all of those things are there in place to safeguard the interests. But first thing, work with someone before getting them on board as a co-founder. Understand what their worst looks like. Help them understand, or, things will happen for sure where your worst is going to come out. Can they put up with it? It's not just about you, it's the other person as well. You could be the absolute worst founder that they can think of. So that's the most basic primal criteria that I think that every founder should be aware of. You can get lucky, you can find someone that you gel so well, even the worst is feels like, this is nothing and you're happy to go further with that relationship. But more often than not, you'll come across people where you'll struggle in handling their worst and they will struggle handling your worst as well because you're inherently so different that working towards something together becomes a challenge in the long term.
Yes, I totally agree. And one of the thing which personally I have seen is like probably like there are many platform I have already told like why it is kind of a marriage, right? You should know in and out about the person behavior as well, right? क्योंकि दोनों आपस में complementary भी होना चाहिए है ना क्योंकि अगर आप दोनों सेम ही चीज कर रहे हो then it's बहुत सारी चीजें फिर you need to rely on lots of different factors as well, different people as well, which might take little bit more time for your startup, your business as well, right? And अगर आप किसी को जानते हो पहले से ही
100%. On the complementary thing, here is the thing. The hard skills can be complementary. But when you talk about the values that you hold, moral compass that you have, when you talk about how persistent can someone be, where their perseverance stands, these things need to align.
yes,
यहाँ पे if it becomes complementary, then it's a huge problem.
yes. Yes, agree. Great. My next question is like there are many people who would love to start their own startup, but some of them keep just thinking and some of them just jump on, right? So what is the best way to understand about your idea? What is the best way to start your own startup? Like क्या करना चाहिए जब आपके पास idea है तो क्या करना चाहिए? Since you are a founder, you are a mentor as well.
Sure. So here is the example that I give to every founder that I talk to. Idea, execution. These are the two things that you have heard in the entire world, especially startup ecosystem. But let me ask you this. For anybody coming or looking to go into engineering, you completed your 12th class. Did you directly go and write your IIT exam? Most probably no. Okay. You completed your graduation. Did you directly go and write your UPSC exam? Most probably no.
Yep.
You spent some time preparing.
Yes.
And that preparation layer is what is massively missing from the startup ecosystem. Here is the thing. Building a startup is essentially not about problem solution. I'll give you another example here. And that's what my belief is. You'll hear counter views to this as well. But here is the thing. If people could make millions of dollars solving world hunger, it would be solved. Nobody can say that there isn't enough land. Nobody can say that there isn't enough seeds. Nobody can say that there isn't enough water. If I could make $1 million solving world hunger, I would do that and leave everything aside. So problem is real. Yes. Solutions exist. Yes. Why is it not solved? Business viable. And the clarity that you bring to the system in terms of all the different aspects of your business. It's not as simple as saying that here is what I see as a problem. No, that's not a problem. That's a hypothesis that you're drawing. You have to either go ahead and figure out ways to validate it or invalidate it. And more often than not, whatever hypothesis that you're drawing, especially at an early stage, they will be invalidated. You have to have that clarity to see what next. What do I do with respect to my marketing, with respect to my GTM, with respect to my X, with respect to my Y? So when you're building a company, it's a lot about all the combination of different things. Do not remain stuck to any of it. It's all a one big experiment. You have to constantly figure out where my failures are, where my risks are. How do I mitigate those? How do I overcome those? How I move on from those? So while I would want to give a simpler answer, there is none. If there was, every startup would become successful, but it doesn't happen. It's a lot about the founders. How open are you? How questioning are you? How much conviction and confidence do you bring to the table? And most important thing, a lot of founders think that I've built a product and people will buy it. No, you have to sell it. Selling, especially at an early stage, is probably the most difficult thing that you will do. It's actually more difficult than building a product, unless you're talking about maybe quantum computing and something else, right? Very niche. Most products, selling is the difficult part. Early stage. Once you've established a brand, it's a different ballgame. So this is exactly what I do at Julian Ventures. We work with startups to try and figure out all the gaps, poke holes as much as we can, help you build that confidence, conviction, and everything else to be able to get to a point where you are confident that no one can ask me X number of questions that I don't have answers for. Valid and good answers. But this is what it takes. You have to have a very clear understanding about the business. And that includes your market, that includes your competition and everything else. So a lot needs to go behind building a successful startup for the faint-hearted, for sure.
And how can someone validate his or her idea?
So,
जैसे idea है तो उसको कैसे validate कर सकते हैं?
okay. So again, on the internet, you'll find multiple answers to this question. But here is what I believe very strongly. There is only one validation. People buying from you. Not telling you it's a good product. Not telling you, yeah, it's a wonderful thing. Keep doing it. Not telling you, yeah, if you build it, I'll buy it. Not telling you, I'm happy to give you a LOI. Actually making a purchase. That is the only validation that I look at. Everything else, in some form or manner, has got a risk component and an assumption to it that can either be validated or invalidated. So there's no concrete validation that has happened if there is any other stage apart from actual sale happening. So people come to me and tell me a lot that, I've got 1,000 people community, I've got this, I've got that, and, I've got 50, 100 list. And my response is, how much sale have you actually made? You can have 100 people in your wait list, does not mean you have 100 customers.
Yes.
You would eventually need to make that sale first. And that sort of takes me into the sales part. I cannot emphasize more how important sales is when it comes to early stage startups. But the most important component of sale is not you, not the problem that you think others have, not the product that you have built. It's their problem. How well you understand your consumers, how well you understand the decision makers, how well you have identified, segregated, and sort of figured out where their different motivations are or fears are. That is what is eventually going to help you define the narratives that someone else can, especially your consumer, can associate with. Me telling you that, boss, here is the thing, I've built this product, do you see value in it? More than likely, you are a nice person and you would come back to me and say that, yeah, I love it. The moment I say, I remember you telling me that you had this problem. I've got something that can solve this. It's at a cost. Now the association is real to them. It's not about you, it's about them, right? So sales, extremely important, but the precursor to sales is that you need to understand the people you are selling, right? So I think that's the short answer to this question. Sales by itself is like a epic saga that can be sung over, and there are classes after classes that are done on this, but that's the short summary of it.
Great. And people also have the idea, and but sometimes they just stick to it, right? But again, But I have seen they can evolve from time to time, right? So probably when you start and when the time you are building your first prototype, there can be huge differentiation as well, right? Completely different product might be. So, like, is it necessary for a founder to be open to it, or is it okay to stick to it? What do you suggest?
Idea is a notion, an assumption or a bunch of assumptions that you have put together to make yourself believe in something that has got no tangible or material outcome yet. Okay. Very complicated, but I am hoping that people will understand what I'm talking about here. But it's you, no one else. Okay. Now, let me take back to the answer. How do you build a business out of an idea? It's not so much about what you are thinking alone. It's a lot more about what you are doing, who you are doing it for, who you are doing it with. So sticking to something that is only relevant to you, and maybe direct, indirect validations have happened without any actual payment coming to you,
Yes.
that has no significance and relevance in the long term. What is the long term objective here? To be able to build a business. An idea alone does not build business, revenue does. How do you get to revenue? You have to figure out the right pressure point that can help put out something in the market that people can now purchase. And you cannot arrive at this if you remain fixated. Remain fixated is like you're in a football match and you're standing there and thinking, I'll make a goal. No, you have to move. You have to sometimes be
Yes.
center field. You have to go left. You have to go right. You have to go forward. You have to go backward. It's a lot of combination of all of those things. All of those things need to happen in real time.
Yes.
So it's never a good idea to remain fixated on an idea. Be very flexible about it. Take whatever is coming into your stride, assess, analyze, dissect, and then figure out what I can take from here. What do I have to leave behind? What you can take, assess whether it adds value to your idea and helps move towards your goal. If not, drop it. A huge part of building a startup is saying no. If you don't know how to say no to all the things that don't matter or are going to dilute your efforts and your whatever resources you have available in some form or manner, it's not going to be fruitful. So very focused approach with lots of clarity and flexibility is required to be able to get to the point where you could say that I have achieved my goal.
Just give you our example, right? So initially when we started, we had certain idea. Uh, Built something, we started speaking to lots of people. We have collected some feedback, and every time we get feedback, अरे हाँ ये भी कर सकते हैं, अरे हाँ वो भी कर सकते हैं. Everyone will have different suggestion, different advice and all. But how to define the goal and एज यू हैव टोल्ड राइट कि एक गोल की तरफ हमें फिक्स करके चलना है. बट जब हम लोग कस्टमर सेंट्रिक कस्टमर से बात करें हर टाइम कुछ कुछ फीडबैक आते रहते हैं एंड एवरी टाइम वी रियलाइज कि यार भी करना है वो भी करना है बट वी डोंट हैव एज यू हैव टोल्ड वी माइट नॉट हैव एवरीथिंग ऑल काइंड ऑफ रिसोर्सेज टू दैट build that product as well.
I'll probably break this down into two parts. One, where is it that you are coming from? And where is it that the customer is coming from? As an organization, as a startup, when you're looking at this problem statement, you have to really go and figure out, okay, let me rephrase. So let's say you have 5 customers who have said that, I want A, B, C, D, E. Okay. Now what do you do? That's use case 1. You have to really go ahead and figure out a prioritization. You cannot do this all at the same time. And then on
Yes.
top of that, you have to go and set that right expectation with each of these customers. And obviously, there is a lot of nuance to it, but that's a quick answer that I'm trying to get to. So, prioritization, setting right expectations. If it comes down to it, telling 2 of these guys that I will not be able to get to it in the next 6 months. And that's where the original point that I had prior to this, how well do you know your customers? These 2 guys do not probably even belong in the ideal target customer list that you had. If you have to even modify things so drastically that it loses its original shape and form, then either whatever hypothesis you held earlier was not right and it has been invalidated, or you are not targeting the right set of people. Okay. So that's use case 1. Second thing is that if A, B, C, D, E, but all of them are asking for F, then you know F is something that is required 100%.
Yes.
And then again, fall back, prioritization, setting the right expectations,
Okay.
saying no, cutting down customers. See, early stage startup, most founders think that I'll put it out in the market and from enterprise to the smallest guy will come and buy it from me. Not going to happen. You have to have your own slice of this market. You have to first define it for yourself, identify it, approach it, and then talk and convert it.
Okay. Okay.
Entire spectrum is not available to you. Where is your niche? You have to find it.
Yes. Okay. And any right approach to do that? कि क्या exactly करना होता है कि मतलब generally everyone will have to be इतना market size है इतना अ, कर सकते हैं ये कर सकते हैं वो कर सकते हैं like what is the right approach?
Right approach is only one. And again, it's again very nuanced, but there is only one right approach, which is focus on one thing. Everything that you want to do, figure out what that one thing is. You will run your experiments. For example, let's say you want to say that I want to do a GTM motion and these are my 3 channels that I want to utilize. You don't have the money to optimize for all 3 channels. Pick one. Which one? That's where the rest of the nuances, right?
Yes.
But in terms of theory of it, okay, don't go too wide is what I would recommend to any founder. Focus one thing, one problem, one product. Don't try and create 5 different products and then try and figure out where it is going to stick. One product, one ICP, one GTM channel, and the rest of the spectrum, right? So the more focus you bring, if there is a point of failure, you have a bunch of set of questions and decision trees that you could potentially go through to try and identify where that point of failure is, and let me run an experiment there to see what sticks. So you're not running an experiment across the entire spectrum of the business. You are running an experiment on specific points to figure out the stickiness. So there is no right solution as such to this. Right approach would be to remain focused and figure out where your point of failures are and how do you keep optimizing it, experimenting with it.
Great. Thanks, Amiya. So now one question for you as an investor, right? So as an investor, what you'd look in any kind of startup, right? क्या पहले देखते हो? Because you have been a founder, you were then you became a mentor. Now you are investor as well. क्या क्या देखते हो मतलब एक startup पे? And what is the right time for any startup to approach any investor?
One clarification, I'm not an investor anymore. To be while I was with the fund, but not anymore. But I can certainly answer this question for you. So here is the thing. To me, investment is a lot about figuring out what future potential something holds or a startup holds. What you do right now is relevant, but what I'm trying to figure out and what I'm trying to underwrite is what is the future that you are creating? And do I believe in that future? If I don't believe in that future, I'm not going to be not going to be able to underwrite it. The components of that could be in terms of what kind of team do you have? What kind of market are you in? Who are your competitors? How big are they? How well funded are they? It could pretty much just be about, and what kind of clarity do you have with the people that you're selling something to, right? So I wouldn't say that there are, just 1 or 2 points. It's an entire spectrum of things that I would typically look at. But team is probably a very important component, especially early stage, that I would look at to try and identify, do you have the chops to be able to identify and assess whether you are even on the right track or not? It's not easy for founders to take criticism. It's not easy for founders to take rejections. So if I tell someone that this does not make any sense whatsoever, my point is not to, bring someone down. My point is to try and figure out, do you have it in you to be able to come back and ask why not? And then have a healthy conversation and then assess whether I say makes sense or not. So it's a very fluent conversation that I prefer to have, where the reservations are brought out and then it's left to the founders to assess how they want to process it, and how they choose to process it is where the decision lies.
Okay. So now question which I have is, now with the AI in place, right? Everywhere people are using AI, right? We are seeing that there are lots of startups who have like the very lean team, and with the use of AI, they are able to generate a huge amount of revenues as well, right? So are you seeing any kind of use cases in India startup ecosystem as well? Are we using in compared to US and other places in the startup world? And if yes, what is the effect? What is the better way to use it and to be profitable as well?
So yes, certainly there are, even we do. We use AIs. Okay. So certainly there is scope. There is some distance that these models have to cover to be able to a point where they would start to make major differences within themselves, or working through agents or multiple agents together. So MCP and all of those things in context. So scope is there. Utilization is there. It is happening. People are doing it, but it will take some time before it sort of materializes into something of its own that people could start leveraging to the extent that they think they can leverage right now. Still some time.
Okay. And generally, many company or many startup founders generally tell that India market is very tough compared to the West, right? So, what your opinion on that? Like, is it true? And when someone is starting in India, like, good for him to bootstrap or raise fund or like move to South and then come back to India? What do you suggest?
So I think that the key thing to remember about the India market is the people. We generally do not take anything for face value when we have to pay money for it. If you are telling me that, this exists, I will believe you. But if you tell me that to see this, you have to pay money, I'd be like, no. Right. So until unless your friend comes to you and says that I saw this was brilliant, you have to go and see it, then you would be willing to spend that money to go and see it, right? So the Indian society inherently is a very trust-driven society. The thing that I would say is trust-driven, value-driven. These are the kind of keywords that come to mind when I think about the Indian society. Very money conscious. If I can get something, and again, the whole concept of jugaad, if I can get something done as a
Yes.
jugaad, then why would I be paying, $100,000 to someone else to be able to fix it?
Yeah.
So the sense of urgency as a function of making payment for solution, that's really crucial. And the fact that we are inherently a culture where we value our savings, that inherent
Yes.
difference is very prominent. So yes, very different. But then also for the right set of people, right set of startups, right set of products, we will use it, we will pay for it, we will be happy to consume it. I wouldn't know how to define tough, but different for sure.
Okay.
I'm sure that, if you go to the US market and ask them that, how would you define tough in the US market, they have their own definitions. So tough has got different definitions across geography, and every geography is inherently tough. There are startups in the US who are not able to make sales. So I wouldn't say tough as an absolute and standalone thing in India with respect to US. Different, most certainly.
Agree. Agree. Great. Interest of time, one last question. So, what is the right time for any startup to raise fund? करूँगा and investor का money burn करके दिखाऊंगा कि कैसे के $1 billion का company बनाया है. Lots of people have those kind of mindset, right? So, what is the right time to raise fund?
Never. Here's the thing. So funds are a function of business. Your capability to be able to showcase that you can build a sustainable, scalable, and profitable business. That's what someone else is betting on and willing to put their money to get on that journey with you. If you are a kind of business who can build good business without any external capital, like Zerodha, Zoho, prominent examples, right? You really don't need external capital to be able to sort of
Yes.
come in and help you do that. But times are very different. If Nikhil Kamath and Nitin Kamath had to come and do it today, they would also struggle. They would also need external capital. Again, my opinion, they might have a different opinion. But the fact that if you are a pre-seed startup, when I say pre-seed, not an idea stage funding is extremely rare, only going to happen from maybe friends and family or someone you know very well, someone who knows you that you have that kind of capability and everything else to be able to do that. Idea stage is, I've rarely seen that working out unless you are
Okay.
again literally very niche, you come from a ISRO background and then trying to build the next rocket. Sure, maybe it can happen. But idea stage typically doesn't happen. Most people think they can get the money to build the product. That again does not generally happen. Okay. Again, depends on the product, depends on the person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the most common use case where people think that one of the two most common use cases that I've seen. I need money to build the product. Very rarely that's going to happen. You have to either bring in an industry, a segment, a skill set, and a team who gives me the confidence that yes, you can, and it is extremely niche for me to be able to make money out of it. Or you're more like a second time founder. Now I have probably more confidence that yes, sure, you could do something. The other use case is that I have built the product. Now I want to take it to the market, which is still more real than I want money to build the product. Most times it's not happening. Investment is not happening more often than not. The second use case where I've built the product, now I want to take it to the market. There is a real probability that the investment could potentially happen.
Okay.
So the ideal time to raise money is a very open-ended question because it depends on the stage, depends on the product, depends on the team, and a lot of other market factors, external, internal, everything else.
Yes.
But if I have to just break it down and say that if you are a pre-revenue startup, the earliest you can start is when you have the product ready and you have an absolute understanding of the business viability. You have absolute clarity and focus about what is it that you're doing. You start raising. Once you have gone past that stage, you have already put the product in the market, started gaining traction, and depending on the runway that you have, your burn rate and everything else, you could then start approaching investors, assessing what's the right time. Don't wait till the last minute to reach out to investors because the investment cycles do take a long time to close and they're not easy. The due diligence piece of it can take 2 months. So figure out enough runway, at least like 6 to 9 months you should have before you even approach the investors. So I think that's how I'd break it down to say that, okay, pre-revenue, once you have the product, then you go into market. Once you have revenue and you have traction, make sure you have good runway left. Otherwise, it's a desperate situation. Most people would potentially turn around and say no unless you are really doing something that has got that potential but is extremely capital intensive.
So before we wind up, if you can quickly have any kind of feedback or suggestion for our startup founders like me.
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is, come on board Juvin Ventures. We'd be happy to help you out. But in all seriousness, I can keep harping about these terms, but here is the thing: business viability, clarity, focus, good team. These are just keywords. But to listen to this, to understand it, to imbibe it, to execute on it, these are different stages. And every function of the business needs this to happen. It is not happening when you say that, this is a very real problem. Sure, it might be a real problem, but I don't see you talking clearly about what is it that you are doing, what market, what competition, what's your GTM. And these are very real questions, right? Investors have these questions as well for founders. So the only thing that I would say is that don't remain stuck. Focus on the eventual outcome. First principle, second order, these are not keywords. These are there to be implemented. Ask those questions from yourself. Get down to the absolute bottom of what you are doing. If you think that something is represented superficially and there is a hypothesis that's going behind it, you have to really understand what is going to validate, invalidate it, where the risks are. And nobody can teach you these things. These have to come from within, right? Someone can tell you about it, but your understanding is the most important component of this equation. If you don't understand, problem. If you can't imbibe it, problem. If you can't execute on it, problem. And this is what investors typically look for. So overall, you are just trying to make sure that everything that the founder and the startup stands for, it makes sense and gives us the confidence that you will be a successful founder and you will be able to make a successful business of what you're doing. Okay. So yeah, that's the summary of it. Don't get stuck in your own thoughts.
Thank you, Amiya. We started with talking about mindset, then we started shifting from job life to a startup life. We discussed lots of different things. We also talked about idea stage to validate different ideas, and as well we also talked about like what is the right time to raise funds as well. We also talked about like different, just like Jubian Venture can also help lots of different startups in early days. So thank you so much. I personally enjoyed, and if you feel this podcast, this episode is valuable, feel free to reach out to Amiya. He is a great mentor. I personally have reached out to him earlier. I loved him, and because of that, I thought this is the right time to invite him. I have invited him, and he have accepted. So thank you, Amiya, once again. It was a great discussion, and I loved it.
Thank you so much, Praful, for having me. It was really a wonderful discussion. I truly enjoyed it. And I'm really hoping that for your audience or anybody else who's listening to this, they actually sort of think about things before venturing into the entrepreneurship journey. A lot of thought process, a lot of preparation needs to go behind what you are doing. And then again, for Praful, you have been very kind, very generous with your words. So really thankful. And I'm really hoping that, with respect to I'm a Recruiter podcast or even Vanta Hire, I'm really hoping all the best. And anything else that I can do for you or for anybody else in your audience, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Praful. Take care. Have a good day.